it kind of shocked me that it was like so similar to every sale. There was like negotiation happening, which was very drastically different than the experience of when I went in after my dad died. Nobody's negotiating with like a crematorium once someone has died. You're in pain. You're not in the right mind to do so. You like feel like you're not honoring this person if you're like, can you knock $20 off my like dad's cremation? The rate of funeral prices or like just general death related costs are going up like 20% every year, like way outpacing inflation. And again, we don't negotiate and we aren't prepared. So like people are going into debt over these things.
Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. My guest today, Emily Kyle. Emily, welcome. One of another fellow women founder in the death tech space. So please share with our audience what got you here today.
Yeah, so as Niki said, I'm Emily Kyle. I'm from Good Grief, and I never thought I'd end up working in this space. I lost my father 4 years ago, and I was kind of haunted after 4 years of still trying to do his taxes that like dying for the people who are left behind should not be this difficult. It should not be this much administrative work, and became obsessed with this problem. So that's why we started Good Grief. It's to help people who, after they've lost a loved one, with all the administrative and bureaucratic parts of loss that people don't really know about.
It's that post-estate piece. It's, it's interesting. Do you get this? I get this a lot where people will be like, oh, I don't have anything.
All the time.
What's your response when people say that?
I think people think like if they don't have a certain level of assets, it means they don't have anything. But I think people don't consider the fact that they have like wishes and things that like they want to happen or stories they want to pass along. And so like we blanket anything into assets, and the reality is like that's not accurate. And so I kind of just start asking them general questions like, well, like how do you want to be remembered? And then it obviously triggers like a long story, and you're like, okay, so you do have opinions about this and you do have things to leave behind.
I hear it multiple times, which is, dead is dead. What do I care? They'll figure it out. But then here you are trying to figure out your father's taxes. Did he ever, would he have ever realized by him not organizing, it would have left you with such a pain point?
I don't think he ever thought about it. I will say I'm grateful that he lived life so hard that he didn't think about these things, but I don't think he ever would have wanted me to leave me in this state. I think he probably wanted better, but really people again have no concept. I think my dad, for example, hadn't done his taxes in years, so I think he thought that just kind of goes away when you die, and I think most people think that, right?
Red flag.
Right. It becomes nobody's problem. I don't really know. But it is kind of shocking that you do end up doing a dead person's taxes when you're like, I don't even want to do my own taxes.
That should be, I think that's going to be a hook, doing your, dead person's tax. Dead people still owe taxes, right?
Dead people still, no, I'm when they say death and taxes, literally, even when you're dead, you can't escape taxes. So I'm I think taxes are worse at this point. I'm not gonna put that out there, but yeah, the one thing you can't escape is taxes.
You can't escape taxes. I mean, and then here you are, trying to figure this out, and at the same time, you want to honor him. Weirdly, yeah. I've heard also stories where people I love my parent, but they left with such a mess that I'm so angry at them or resentful. But for you turned it around and you created a business around it. So talk to us a little bit about your platform and what it does for people.
Well, I would say it actually is the resentment, to avoid resentment. Because I will say, I think a lot of this was born out of some resentment for how difficult I think the system or government is, or the lack of systems we have are, but also just I felt so helpless in what I was doing, and to the point where you're like, this is a once in a lifetime thing. You don't even know where to ask for help or like what you would even ask. And so that's exactly what good grief is designed around. It's meant to be smart, but like never knowing more than you or knowing about more your situation, but also like we're kind of like the platform, and what we do are like we're the internal experts to help like be your partner in this. So we're trying to think like one step ahead of you without overwhelming you. So for example, when I was faced with making a choice of like, what do I do with my father's body? Like, I really didn't know what my options were, and I was pushed towards cremation. And because it was like the cheapest, and I said yes, but wasn't really like, oh, there's like green burial options or there's XYZ. Like, none of that was posed to me. It was like, well, you care about costs, so this is what's available to you. And it would have been nice to like have known those were a choice for me, because I do think like, had I considered it or taken the time or known what was available, I might have made a different choice. And I think a lot of these choices are like one-way decisions. Like you can't go back on cremation, right? And so the platform is designed, like Good Grief is designed to like not make choices for you, but allow you to have enough education in these moments where your grieving brain is not really thinking clearly, to like source better opportunities that fit your family's needs.
I mean, you brought up a really good point, which is people are waiting till they're waiting till they're in crisis. And when I speak to, it doesn't matter how old a person is. I've had as much resistance talking to a 70 and 80-year-old as I do talking to a 30 or 40-year-old. Actually, I have an easier time talking to 30 and 40-year-olds because either they're thinking about necessarily themselves or their parents, but talking to a 70 or 80-year-old about this, there's just this level of like, like your dad, like, oh, well, they just die with me, right? I don't have to pay taxes. Everything just will be handled magically.
Yeah, I think people think that talking about it makes it come faster, which would make it easier for a 30-year-old to talk about it because it feels very distant. But I do think like like in the everyday when you wake up and you have a new like backache, it does feel like more real and like I think more difficult to talk about in those scenarios. And like the day-to-day of it is real in some ways. I'm going through this with my mom right now. She and her sister are moving in together. It's like their retirement plan. And so like all of this is coming up and I'm the mediator for it all. And it's brought up lots of interesting discussions because like we're trying to early redesign like a shower to like be wheel-in, which like everyone's like, I'm not going to be the one who has any disabilities. And it's like, cool, but we need to like plan ahead. Like we don't know what's going to happen, but like having these discussions has been eye-opening and like I feel like faced a lot of resistance.
And how old is your mom?
My mom is 72.
Okay, so still a young senior.
Yeah.
And yet they can't imagine what life is going to be like. And so are they just resistant to planning, or they're just in denial that it's never going to happen to them?
I think it like feels like you need to plan for every eventuality rather than thinking like talking about maybe what your ideal would be. And so I think you just like you get stuck in the like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, and then you stop there. And actually, one of the hardest things I think has been the stuff. And I think this touches on like what the stuff.
Like,
the stuff.
Oh, are they? They're moving. They're downsizing.
Yeah,
they're
they're
going from
consolidating to one house. Yeah. And so I think it brings in, I think like what you talk about life is like our sprawling, like digital life, but also just like our general life has just like sprawled and we tend to fit into whatever space we have. And like with digital things, you don't even really notice. And so they're consolidating to one thing. And so it's like literally everything is coming to a head of like, what can we like share? We've even talked about like sharing phone plans. Like how do we consolidate all of these things? And it brings to light like everything that has kind of gotten out of hand. And like there's so much identity, I think, associated with a lot of these things. And so, yeah, it's like everything becomes like painful. Yeah.
And so is your mom on your platform? Like is she?
My mom is my number one user tester, honestly. Like it's not necessarily designed for her generation because it is designed for like the people who are left behind who are picking up the pieces. It's meant for like the sandwich generation who's like, my parents didn't have a plan. I don't know what's happening. We might have tried to have these discussions, but like I'm sort of just picking up the pieces. But it has been good to use to like know to like do every instance of user testing of like if my mom can understand, like this might be usable. But I think it has like been very informative of like discussions that we do need to have of like her setting up like what are your wishes. We went on a funeral home tour as part of my personal research into what I was doing, and we learned a lot. And I think she actually has decided through that that she wants to do body donation, because we were floored by the cost of everything, and like I think there was like not a lot of transparency around cost too, which like didn't feel great. And so I think it's helped inform decision, but we've never talked in the ways we have like as like talking about death has like spurred conversations. I think we've gotten actually a lot closer in the past couple of years since I've started what I'm doing. So
let's just take it back.
Sorry,
whose idea was to spend vacation doing what did that look like going on a funeral tour? It's like a restaurant, restaurant week. Well, okay. Oh, go ahead.
So yes, it was not nearly as exciting. So I'm from San Francisco originally, and San Francisco, they like made it illegal to have cemeteries or burial grounds, any like buried remains there. So they moved all of the things to Colma. So Colma is known, right outside of San Francisco, is known for having more dead people than alive people. So it felt like a very efficient place to go to do research on more like cemetery practices, like mortuaries, crematoriums, anything like that. And so I was able to like in 1 mile go visit like 20 funeral homes in like a literal 1 mile radius. And my mom just kind of like wanted to come along for the ride, because she was also like, I'm curious. She's very curious, and she's like mostly retired now. So she came along with me, and and like, because I think we were also going to a green burial site, and she was very curious about that as a possible end of life option for her. So it was like along the way. So we went together, and I think, so this was all like pre-need stuff, which I think is very different, but it did feel like very sales pitchy, which I think was off-putting to her. But it was an interesting mother-daughter field trip. They were like, we don't get a lot of you. And like, I was asking so many questions, like, are you in the industry? Because like, you're asking like the weirdest, very specific questions.
Did you reveal that you had a company?
I did. Yeah. So it was both like we were able to do research for her to get more information, and for me to just like, learn more about like their practices, what are the options and stuff like that. So it was a fascinating mother-daughter bonding trip.
Yeah.
We got a cocktail afterwards. I did get her a cocktail afterwards.
I was going to say, it's not your typical, mother-daughter spa day. Mani-pedi.
That's not us.
That's classic. That's awesome. Look, being in the death tech space, it's like, what'd you do this weekend? We went to go visit cemeteries. I mean, I ask, like, I've got a couple friends. I'm like, can we go visit the cemetery? I really would like to see what their green burial options are. Yeah. And like you said, the whole pricing structure is fascinating, right?
Yeah, it was interesting, because I think I'd never been through like a sales process like that, but it was like, it kind of shocked me that it was like so similar to every sales. They're like, if you lock it in by this month, like prices will lock you in like certain prices. And there was like negotiation happening, which was very drastically different than the experience of when I went in after my dad died, when it was like urgent. I think that's what people don't think about. It's like, nobody's negotiating with like a crematorium once someone has died. But like, you can do those things because it feels, I think, insensitive. You're in pain. You're not in the right mind to do so. And I think you like feel like you're not honoring this person if you're like, can you knock $20 off my like dad's cremation? He would have wanted that. Like, nobody's doing that, but like there is the option to do so in advance. And I don't think people don't realize how important that is, because I don't know if you know the stat, but like the rate of funeral prices or like just general death related costs are going up like 20% every year, like way, way outpacing inflation. And again, we don't negotiate and we aren't prepared. So like people are going into debt over these things.
So what kind of price range were they coming in? I mean, look, our conversation is really about your company, but sorry, this is
no, I'm happy to talk about this.
Price.
I think the biggest shock was when we went to one of the green burial cemeteries, which I would say there's not a lot of competition for, right? And I think they hold like higher standards, which might cost more. And so this was in the Bay Area, which is already a very costly place. So I think when you're thinking green burial, you're thinking like, well, they're just gonna dig a hole and like that's it. But the reality is like you're in a scenario like that, you're paying for real estate. And so the lowest price was around $9,000 for a plot, like way down at the bottom of the hill. But they're like, you can see the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm like, you're dead, you're dead. Sorry, I sound so insensitive,
No,
but
but
like I understand that
laugh.
it's important to some people.
And you bring up a really good point, which is again going back to good grief, right? Is that dead is not dead. And if someone says that to me one more time, dead is not dead. It's you're leaving those major decisions to the people you leave behind. Oh, and by the way, it's their credit card that they have to put down if you don't plan for this.
Yeah.
And if they don't, if you want it, is it okay to be at the bottom of the hill? Is it okay for your body donation? Like do you really want me to spend $15,000 to say goodbye, or can I do it in a more meaningful?
Yeah. And those are like, even you telling me this right now, and I'm not making any decisions, like, is stressful because like nobody has the answers to that, and you aren't thinking clearly in like this state of grieving. And I like admit, like, you did feel bad when you're like, well, there's one plot left at that price range, and it's like at the bottom of the hill by the like gated the like chain link fence, and you're like, would I want my mom to be there? I don't think so. And then they're like, well, where do you want to visit? And you're like, well, obviously I want to visit the top of the mountain where I can see the view. And it's like kind of manipulative, but it like, yeah. Anyway.
So going on your website, can we avoid that scenario?
You could avoid that scenario. I would actually say like the best way to avoid that scenario, and this is not a product pitch but it's like plan ahead.
Plan ahead.
The more you plan ahead, the more you can get exactly what you would have wanted and not put your family through this. So what we can help you do is, or like after the fact, if you are making these big decisions, is to be able to have like more transparent pricing, to know your options before you were able to go into a sales scenario and have to make those decisions. So that is what we could help you do. We can like learn your preferences and say like, hey, we know you do care about green burial. This is what is available legally in your state. This is maybe what it would cost. Like, do you want us to get quotes for you? So we can help with that, but like still that leaves a lot of decisions up to that person. Yeah.
And those decisions really need to be made ahead of time when you're not in crisis, when you're of sound mind, when you're not dealing with memory care issues. And, the population I'm very sensitive to is the solo agers. And I feel like they need to be more proactive and educated in order to make these decisions so far ahead of time that they're able to document, communicate, make sure that these vendors are, solvent and backup plans. So who is your ideal client for Good Grief?
Our ideal client, I think, is the sandwich generation. So the person who's probably has a family at home working full time, and they've had like a parent or aunt or uncle, whatever, like have just passed away. And it doesn't really matter if they've planned or not, we can help throughout the process. So on average, it takes around 2 years to close out an estate. And I think people think that, because they have a will, everything is set it and forget it. But the reality is, a will just gives the court sort of a roadmap to follow. And there's a lot of things that come up along the way that people don't know how to navigate, or have, again, not been trained for, because this is a once in a lifetime scenario. So a will might cover like, hey, I do want to be buried and XYZ, and this is what I want my memorial to look like. And like, I want like Bobby to get my baseball card collection, but it doesn't go into the level of like, hey, you're going to need to sell my house and every single belonging in it, including like the kitchen scissors, which is a whole other task. Like, it's a full-time job. So it's for people who like, there's so much overwhelm and have full-time families, full-time jobs, and like do not want to take on the burden of, I don't know if I've said this already, but like the 570 hours that it takes to close out an estate over the 2-year period.
So, and I know that that's a big hook for you, is you have calculated out anywhere between 540 to 570 plus hours of, and we're just talking administrative. And this is where, I sit on my, mountaintop screaming my final playbook, like, educate, project manage, empower people to build out a
Yeah.
comprehensive end of life plan because it's going to take administrative time at your most
It takes so much time.
emotionally vulnerable.
At your worst moments in your life when you're like you're literally not thinking
Yeah.
clearly, like your brain, I like your brain's mush. But so I don't know if I told you this, but like when I started this about a year ago. The number was 540 hours, and it's gone up to 570 in that single year. And I would say a lot of that is digital sprawl. And I think, again, the lack of preparation, like the number of people who are dying without a plan is going up, and like the costs are rising. So I do think people are scrambling to figure out how to pay for these things. So the statistic I saw was that 37% of people are financing something related to a death related expense. And that was up from 14% the year before. And so I think the more complicated it's getting, the more expensive things are getting, like the worse and worse this problem is becoming.
And
Sorry, I don't
no,
want to
no,
scare
no,
everybody.
no, that's what we're trying to do is we're not trying to
Yeah.
scare, we're trying to educate people. I mean, I've gone,
Yeah.
I just went to a conference, a Web3 conference, a lot of tech bros and,
Are they
tech
prepared?
babes, tech bros. And and they're walking around with like hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in their like crypto wallets. And they don't have a plan.
That's a huge problem.
They don't have a plan. Why, what do I need a plan for? Really? And then even if I can't talk to them directly, I'm like, what about your parents? Do they have a plan? I don't know. I'm like, you're 30 something years old, maybe, 30, 40 years old, and you don't know if your parents have a plan and they're in their 60, 70s, 80s. No, I don't know. That's private. I don't talk to them about that. Really?
Yeah.
That's like, Emily, you'll appreciate that. It's like tables are reversed. That's like parents not talking to their teenagers about sex.
No, it's exactly
It's the same
that.
thing.
And like it's like you're gonna inherit this problem, and you really can't pay for it to go away. Like there's maybe 1% of the population who can like pay somebody to handle all this, but like most people, like this is not a problem you can like pay to get rid of, right? Like it's going to be there whether or not you plan, it's gonna be there. Yeah.
And then the question is, does it happen sudden and unexpectedly? Or you get that terminal diagnosis? Or worse, you need like a long-term care plan that's like boiling the frog, that just, years, people are living longer,
Yeah.
but they're dying longer too. And I mean,
That's so true.
I spoke to my cousin the other night, and she's now her 88-year-old mother who had a fall, and that one fall like cognitively has changed her, and now she has to start looking at it, but because they never had the conversation ahead of time.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're very blessed that you and your mom I still laugh.
I'm saying, I'm like it was I was actually writing about this yesterday, that I like look back to like around the time my dad died, and my mom tried to show me her will, and I refused to look at it because it was just like my mom's my everything, and I was like, I can't imagine even thinking about this. And so then like cut to, I think it was literally maybe like the same week that was like my dad passed away, and I was just like in it. And now it's so funny. I mean, it's not funny, but like it's so funny to like have the change now of like how we're talking about this. And I think again, like we're so much closer now because we're having these like real conversations. Like they're not easy, but I'm like, I know her much better. I know exactly what she wants. Like, and I think it's like, and it's been like interesting to have these discussions around like green burial practices and the body donation and the pros and cons, and like why would she choose this over another, because it's like aligned with her values, and I would have never ever known that before.
So how, at mother daughter, I wish your mom was on the call, right, to be able to
I know, I'm like, we should invite her next time. She would have loved this.
but to be able to have those conversations. So why do you think it's so hard for people like that scenario? It's the parents talking to their teenagers about sex, and now the tables are turned, and it's us adult children having to talk to our parents about end of life. And if your mom was on the call, what, between, try and channel your mom, and between the two of you, if you were counseling someone, and then showing them, the Good Grief platform, say, hey, like these are things to be thinking
Yeah.
about. Because I know for many people, they don't even know where to start that kitchen table conversation.
Yeah. I'd say the issues come like, well, behavioral change is hard, right? Like people intend to have a will, and it's not like that they're ill intended. It's just like they sit down, they don't really know where to start. They don't have a lot of guidance. And so like that feels hard. So it also, I think it's like, let's say a boomer, for example, like they've probably just retired and they like worked so hard their whole lives to like get this beautiful retirement. I think they're like sort of like living it up, and they don't want to think about this like end. You're like, I'm in a new beginning, and I'm like traveling and doing all these things I dreamt of doing my whole life. And so like to then think about the contrast of like, well, what would be like if I'm not around? And I think people don't want to think about that. Like that feels like a sad thing, rather than thinking about like, what is the legacy I want to leave behind, would be like how I would reframe this, rather than like, what is happening when I'm not around versus like, what is the legacy I want to leave? And they've done such a good job of building a legacy for their families. Like they've inherited or like built up so much wealth in property, in stories and experiences, like everything. And like you have control to like continue building on that even when you're not here, which is kind of magical, right? Like you could set up like, one of these crypto bros, for example, could set up a treasure hunt for their wallet, their like digital wallet, which would be like a cool ass legacy to leave behind. But like we have so much power in our hands to do that and own that, rather than like, I was really resentful of my dad and like did not feel like I was able to like really celebrate him at his funeral, because like the same day as his funeral I was looking for an estate attorney and everybody else was like celebrating his life and I was like frustrated. And like that to me is so sad. So
540, 570 hours. Can we break down what some of those hours are spent doing? So you just mentioned just shopping around for an estate attorney.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't even say I shopped around. Like I just got a recommendation, which I also don't recommend. Like I do think that is something like I did not realize going into it that was going to be a three-year relationship. When my dad passed away, it was like, late COVID times. And so, for example, my court date kept getting changed. And so I was at the mercy of the court. So it's like, you'd prepare for probate. You'd prepare. And then it would be like, wait, we just rescheduled the court date. And so like in the preparation, you're often pulling like tons of bank documents, for years. Cause like, they're like, they need to know exactly like how much interest this is accruing or not. And so, like that takes time. Like, you're like digging up the bank things, and a lot of things I still didn't have access to, because like some of it was between the periods when I was like granted to be executor and like had a state tax ID. And so like the only Wells Fargo was allowed to pull some documents for me. So I'm constantly interacting. I have like a full-time relationship with the banker at Wells Fargo. And so it's like these things that you don't think about that feel like they should be really simple, but there's like a lot of bureaucracy involved. So like no bank is going to make it easy for you to cancel accounts. So even once I was in the point when I like had the authority to do so, like that took months. Like when I wanted to cancel an account, I probably shouldn't have said names, but if I wanted to cancel an account, like they don't let you do so. Like there's not like an automatic button that says this person died, like cancel. You usually have to like find a fax machine and fax.
Wait.
I don't know how much time.
2026. Fax machines still exist?
Right?
No,
I can't believe how many. Yeah. So like that's what's wild. They make it so difficult for you to get a lot of these things. And I don't know if it's like purposely difficult, but I do think a lot of these government systems or insurance systems are very, again, like archaic, and nobody's going to make it easy for you to cancel an account. Like even digital accounts, like when you go in to cancel your Verizon, they're like, are you sure? What's your reason? Can we put you on hold longer before we do so? That doesn't change once someone's died. It's not like, hey, this person died, cancel everything. Cause like, I understand why some things had to like be difficult, because you don't want someone calling and saying like, you died, and like everything is shut down. So like everything needs a verification. So like I think nothing is simple. And especially like if you're someone who's very disorganized, like my dad, like I couldn't find paperwork. And so I would just like, I kept having to like pay for his phone bill and like all his utilities and stuff. So I could keep getting, so I could figure out like sort of like what was happening with his life. I even hired a private investigator. My dad was a very mysterious man. This is for another podcast, but I couldn't understand his like digital and physical like footprint of like what existed for him in his life. And so I had to go to like that length to like be an investigator into this person's journey, essentially. And I still am with his like taxes, for example.
And all you want to do is just grieve. It impacts the grief. I mean, that's my biggest thing when I talk to people, when they say dead is dead, I don't care. I'm like, your loved ones are going to be grieving and they're going to be stressed because they have to go to probate court or be searching for, passwords. And now year after year, they have to file taxes if you have, unpaid taxes throughout your lifetime.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think one of the saddest parts is like, because I was paying for his phone bill, I would like answer it and I'd have to like constantly let new people know that he was no longer around. So it was like this thing that I needed to keep alive was also just like a constant reminder of his death and my loss. And it was devastating. It did not get easier anytime.
He's been gone 4 years. You're still, well, listen, this is motivating you to with the company.
Yeah. I'm like, sometimes I think he's like laughing at me now, but no, it was actually funny. So like, I think because I was so buried in just like the process of it all, like I had started a new full-time job the day after his funeral. And I was in business school. And so I was just like, so I was working full time and in school the whole time. And so I was just like overwhelmed. And I don't think I actually, and like doing all this state stuff. And I don't think I actually got to process. And it wasn't until like his like birthday, I think like last year when I was out of all of that, that I was actually able to be like, oh my God, it was his birthday. And that like was the first time it really like hit me to a new level. And so like this year we actually got around to like spreading his ashes on his birthday. And
so we went to 3 years later. He was sitting on a shelf for 3 years and then
he was literally on a shelf. Yes, literally on a shelf. But he grew up in LA, so we decided, I think, at the end of Endwell, my mom came with me to Endwell, the conference.
And so for people don't know what Endwell is a national end of life conference that they hold once a year out in LA. So you went to Endwell and then you were able to.
I went to Endwell. My parents met at UCLA, and my dad grew up in LA. So we went to like his childhood neighborhood, and his best friend from childhood and his like sister came out, and we spread his ashes. And we were like going around, but it was like broad daylight, and trying to spread ashes in broad daylight. I'm like, am I going to get arrested because it's technically illegal?
Not
anyway.
Yeah.
But like my mom had to fly with his ashes from San Francisco to LA, and they are divorced. And so my mom thought it was funny to like throw half the ashes in a used Ziploc bag that said green beans. So of course she got stopped at like by TSA being like, ma'am. And they like searched through
the bag? They were searching through the ashes. Oh my God, that's like a Monty Python.
They didn't get that far, but they were kind of like, and my mom was like, your dad would have found this hysterical about like the fact that he's getting me stopped at TSA for this green bean bag. But
yeah, make it up.
Yeah, I know.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I should do an episode on traveling, how to sprinkle, how to sprinkle ashes, like different places.
I think it's a good reminder that like, even though we had a memorial for him, like there's still opportunities to continue to memorialize the person throughout time. Like you don't need to feel rushed to get everything. I think that's one of the misconceptions is like, you think you need to get it all done. And I think because you do want it to be over, like you rush to do things, but it was actually, I think, really nice to have waited and been able to like do this together, and like have this time and kind of have some space to be able to like come back together, because I hadn't seen these people since the funeral, to come back together and have new time and new memories. What's really funny, actually, last story on this, I was outside his fraternity house, but it was broad daylight in the middle of UCLA, and I'm like trying to like sneakily scatter the ashes. So I like sit on this ledge, and I'm like trying to open. It's very hard to get ashes out of his giant Ziploc bag. And so the second I try to dump it, like this dumpster falls over like right about on me, and I scream, and all the ashes fly back in my face. And again,
can't make that up.
Like, you can't make this stuff up. But again, it's like, now we made up, like, my dad was such a prankster. Like, you're just like,
you knew that he was there. But so, pro tip, if you're going to sprinkle ashes, I recommend you get like a salt shaker. Like one of the big ones, like even just, and just like, it's just a little.
I realized that was definitely the move. This giant Ziploc bag, not the move. Not the move.
Let's put holes at the bottom, and then there are creative ways to do it. Listen, thank you so much for sharing these are just nuggets of stories because look, if we don't laugh, we'll cry.
Yeah, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And
your dad and what was your dad's name?
His name was Russell.
I mean, he wants us to laugh. He's just like, yeah.
He for sure wants us to laugh. Yeah.
So what are some, 2 to 3 takeaways that our listeners can start thinking about as they explore it? And again, trying to make light of this important conversation and pre-plan.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is, I think you just like have the conversations. Like, even if you don't go to the steps to like prepare in specific ways, like even if you don't have a will, even if your family knows what you wanted, like if you're like, I want maracas at my funeral, or I want everyone to have a flask taped under their chair, or whatever it is, like just like knowing kind of like the humor or the vibe you would have wanted, like I think empowers people to make better decisions, I think, on your behalf. So I'm like, yes, I encourage you to plan, but I think at the end of the day, it's like having these conversations with people you care about while there is still the opportunity to do so.
For sure.
Is my biggest thing.
And the best place people can find you?
The best place people can find me is goodgriefrelief.co. And I'm Emily Kyle. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, all the things.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining and, being able to share, put some humor in there for Russell.
Yeah.
It's all great. It's quite the gift. Thank you so much for joining. And we'll end here. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Niki.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.